Good morning, y'all guys. Good to see you. Sean here from Voices from the Dirt Road. Hey, got a great show set up for you. This week, we're going to be talking about cow-calf operations and the future of the herd. As y'all guys know, there's a lot of things going on in agriculture. But before I jump into that, this is episode number 20. I'm so proud to be able to tell you that. That means our program is continuously moving forward. And I just want to thank everybody who actually views and look at us live here at 7 o'clock in the morning. Then during the week, I know it goes to YouTube and other places. So I just want to say thanks to everybody who kind of keeps this show going. And today, when you're watching us, if you want to ask a question, you want to say hi, please just put it in the chat and the team will get it to me and I'll stop and tell you hi. So let me talk about a couple of things. Let's put the stool up so that we can actually tell everybody about what we do here. As y'all guys know, the people that have been watching this show for a long time, you know that the way that we put this podcast together is to focus on agriculture, to focus on our farmers, to focus on what is actually happening out in rural America. And we do it based on the stool that you see here. Today's show will be focused on livestock. We have in the past talked about row crop, and we know we're still waiting to find more information about our soybean farmers, peanut farmers, cotton farmers. Are those guys in row crop actually going to receive their payments, and when is that going to come? We'll probably do some little bit more on that in the future as we get closer into March, because I think those payments are supposed to come in the February timeframe. And then we also talk about forestry. We've actually had guests to come on the show to talk specifically about the world of forestry, but we also have had guests to come on and talk about specialty crops when it comes to fruit trees and all of those kind of things. So that is all up on the forestry. And then on top of all those things, we like to sprinkle in little things that affect farmers across the board, or just affect the agricultural community across the board. And then, as y'all guys know, to make all of these things work, it is under the umbrella of the USDA. We have actually been asking Secretary Rollins to come to our show, but we're going to keep trying to work on it. We hadn't got there yet, but we do pull a lot of her videos because she's working hard, trying to make things better for our farmers, and we're going to continue to support her. With that being said, all of the farmers, for the most part, with all the changes that happen we all go back into the USDA. Most of us going into the NRCS office, or we going back into the FSA office, depending on how your farm is set up. But ultimately, as you can see up there at the top, it says pass the farm bill. And the reason why we keep that up there is going to stay up there until we actually get it passed, even though right now, little bitty small portions of it has been passed. However, we need to go back and just pass the farm bill as a whole piece there, because right now, when it comes to disasters, for the most part, it's still based on prices from 2018. And we all know cost of living is a lot higher here in 2026. So that when a farmer has an issue on his farm or her farm, the replacement cost is not matching up. So we got to get that farm bill passed so that we can actually keep our farmers whole and keep them going. And then ultimately, I think everybody's tracking. There's a lot of our farmers that's in the hurt locker right now. And we need to get them some relief so that they can actually plant crops for next year. And yesterday, when I was out there on my farm, I actually looked out across the pasture. I was standing on top of one of the hills, and I looked across the pasture. And with the weather, we had a cold spell about 10 days ago, and now it's got kind of warm. My grass is starting to green up a little bit, or at least I'm hoping it's greening up a little bit, because I'm tired of feeding hay. But what I will say is, for our row crop farmers, they should be out in the fields right now, starting to get that ground ready to get ready to put a crop in here soon in the March timeframe. So let's continue to work, and we're going to continue to provide information for you that you can use and you can share with your family across the board, because I'm a firm believer that we got to bring this next generation on board, figure out our succession plans, and on top of that, make sure that we can help that next generation move into the farm and actually be able to take it on board. With that being said, let me talk about the cattle herd as is. Can you put up the chart, please? Hey guys, if you look at this chart here will let you know. I know the numbers are very small, but key piece of this chart, it starts in 2000 and then it goes all the way out to 2026. This chart right here is talking about the cattle inventory. As you can see, yes, there's some ups and downs, but for the most part, everything has been trending down. And that trending down is saying that our cattle herd has been getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Matter of fact, right now, if I have my numbers right, the cattle herd is the smallest it's ever been in 75 years. This is going to be the basis of our conversation today, and that's why I want to make sure that everybody understands, because we have a lot of viewers that are not actually, they're not always farmers like you would have a definition of a farmer. They may have access to a farm or have a cousin or a brother or a mom or dad that does it, but part of our job is also to try to educate. So right now, when you look at the cattle herd, cow-calf producers like myself, yes, we are making money. However, that doesn't mean that everybody in the cattle industry is making money, and we'll talk about that a little bit further down the road. And then you also hear where we bring in beef from Argentina and everything else. You hear about the screwworm situation down in Mexico. You hear about all of these different things that are pushing on the market. But I will tell you the number one thing that's pushing on the market that's making cow prices high is supply and demand, and that supply and demand is on both sides of the coin. The supply and demand on our side or my side is because we don't actually have, we're still talking about building the herd back. However, we're a long ways from building the herd back, because you can't just snap your fingers and say, okay, we have brought the herd all the way back up here. The reality of it is now we are showing that the herd is growing just a little bit, not much. And if we actually decide to keep heifers back this year and the year after that, we may have the herd back to where it was 75 years ago in 2030. So I just want to make sure everybody understand that building this herd back, as you can see there, we're in the lowest ever. And in order to build it back up, it's going to take some years from now. And the question comes in, do the farmers actually have the pasture land? Can they afford to buy more land? Can they afford to release more land? And can they afford to keep that many cattle on the ground in the future? So a lot of things to unpack here today, but I just wanted to give you that premise as we move through some of these conversations that just happened this week. You know, this week, as a farmer, as a cattleman, I think I got out of the military. I know I got out of the military in 2023. It was May. Came back here, started my farm. And one of the things I promised myself as a cattle producer, I was going to do it just like I did it in the military. I believe in professional development. And as a cattleman, I was going to go to the CattleCom in Nashville, Tennessee. I just couldn't make it fit into my schedule. But it looked like to me, and I had some friends who go up, it was a lot of good information up there. So I want to share some of those things, and then we'll come back. But everything that we're talking about today is about 100% the cattle herd of the United States, and how is that going to affect you as the consumer, and then you as the producer like me. With that, let's jump into the very first one and let the Ag Day kind of give us a baseline of what's going on out there in agriculture when it comes to cattle.
The cattle market remains a bright spot, and at this year's CattleCon in Nashville, experts were crunching the numbers, predicting pricing and profit for 2026. Ag Day's Michelle Rook joins me with the factors now at play.
Yeah, Clinton, CattleFax is forecasting the average fed steer price for 2026 at $224. Now that's nearly steady with last year, but feeder cattle prices will be higher, hitting record averages of $335 for 800-pound steers and $440 for 550-pounders. So cow-calf producers may see big profits again in 2026. But those margins could be narrower to even negative in other sectors, especially by mid-2026. 2025 saw record cattle prices in a profitable year for nearly every sector of the cattle business, but especially for the cow-calf producer.
There's a lot of guys that made $1,000 on calves last year, which is astronomical. I mean, that's a whole cycle's worth of margin in previous cycles in 1 year.
And Weber says the profit picture is unlikely to change for cow-calf and the backgrounding sector in 2026.
The backgrounder kind of grass operation, those guys are probably in okay shape yet this year because the market's still appreciating from calves to feeder cattle.
However, the game could change dramatically for those finishing cattle this year, even with near to record high prices due to replacement costs.
So last year was probably a record year for cattle feeding margins, especially for the unhedged producer. We're going to give a lot of that money back. It's already been spent and pushed back into the cow-calf and stocker part of the system. Feed yards, probably the back half of the year's margin opportunity is very slim to largely negative.
You've got the border still closed. Whenever that reopens, and also as we go to the second half of this year, our break-evens are going to be at 250 to 260 coming out of the feed yards. We start to see some losses, in our opinion at least. That combination probably rolls the feeders over, and they'll trend lower as you go through the year.
And the reality is margins are already tightening for feedlot operators like Mike Drennan.
I'm in the market every day for feeder cattle, and you see a lot of cattle that when I run a projection, I mean, some days there's cattle that you could project a $200 loss. Then the next day they almost work. I mean, so you have to be within that market every day.
However, the biggest losses may be felt by the packers. Margins are in the red due to excessive slaughter capacity, which is projected at 600,000 to 1 million head for 2026.
There's more shackle space than cattle. Last year on average is about 7,000 a day. Today it's about 4,000 to 5,000 a day. So even though it's narrowed the gap, leverage should continue to favor the cattle feeder.
And if the border doesn't reopen soon, he says the likelihood of more plant closures is real. I'm Michelle Rook reporting for Ag Day.
Yeah, as you can see there, we're kind of all over the spectrum when it comes to the cattle market. I will talk from where I sit. I'm on the very front end. I'm a cow-calf operator. And with that being said, like they said in the video, we are making money, but what I want to make sure that everybody understands is our input costs are still very high when it comes to fertilize and everything else to actually produce that cow, produce that calf, and then pass it on down further down the road. I will tell you this. I believe as we work through 2026, we will still see record high prices, but at some point it will start to fall off. And when I say fall off, it may not affect myself and other cow-calf operators on the front end, but the question then comes to the guys that are, I run a small farm. I'm not one of those guys that I'm not producing 300 and 400 head of cattle. I'm going to push out somewhere between 30 and 40 head of cattle. So I'm just an average farm. That's who I am. But the reality of it is the guys who are pushing out 200 head of cattle that usually send their cattle to the feedlots, as you heard in the thing, is the feedlot people now are potentially going to lose money. That means when your cattle go into the feedlot, are they still going to pay you the same that you would have got if you would have sent it to the sale barn or sold it to another farmer directly? So as this process works its way through, we got to keep our eyeballs on a couple other things. One, like it was already said, the amount of cattle that's going through the program is a small amount of cattle. That means, just like we talked about last week or the week before, processing plants that actually turn the cow into steaks and hamburger and all those kind of things. Not that many cattle coming through. That means they're laying people off. That means they're actually shutting down some of the plants. So I just wanted to make sure you clearly understand this whole chain of, you could hear your local farmer in your hometown saying this is a great year for the cattle farmer. The question is, does that great year for the cattle farmer feed all the way through? And then if it's not feeding all the way through, could it have great effect on the cattle farmer that's at the very beginning? So that's something that we're going to continue to watch. We're going to continue to talk about. And I will be bringing on some more cattle producers at all of those different levels throughout this year to talk about it, because I think it's very important that as a cattle producer or somebody that want to understand it, understand the entire chain, because that could have great effect on the decisions that you make on your farm, because farming is a business. This is not a hobby. This is not something you're just going to hang out and do. It's a lot of money tied up into farming, especially when it comes to cattle, and you don't want to make that wrong decision and lose all of it. So now I want to move into talking about the cattle supply. And I think when you see this and we talk about it on the back end, that cattle supply will have great effect across the board on all of us. And I'll just go on and tell you, our herd of the United States herd is the smallest it has ever been. And that's why we having to bring beef in from other countries. We have the pressure of the screwworm that's down there in Mexico, and we're doing everything we can to keep it in Mexico. We're working with them hand in hand. I think that'll be a episode that we just focus on that. But on the flip side of the coin is all of these pressures that's keeping that supply herd very low. So with that, play the next video and I'll come back on the back end.
We knew cattle supplies were tight. There's no secret about that. But when we see another 1% reduction in beef cattle, it really fueled the market. Was that the biggest surprise in this USDA report?
Probably so. The beef cow herd being down, the fact that it was down some was not a particular surprise. I thought it also could have been up slightly, so plus or minus unchanged. Came in a little smaller than that. So, but in general, the report, from my standpoint, was pretty much what I expected. The net effect is we've continued to get smaller in this industry, and we are not growing at this point.
Yeah, that is exactly right. We are not growing at this point. I would tell you, like I said, my farm is not the biggest farm. I have big dreams now. I have big dreams, but big dreams and being reality is two different things. And last year, out of all the calves that I had, based on genetics, based on the criteria that I use on here on the farm, that I received from my Georgia Cattlemen Association and others, and talking to other farmers, out of all that herd of cattle that I had, that particular herd of calves, I only kept 2 back for my heifer replacement program. The question is, are other farmers keeping any back? And then this year, crop of calves, will people keep any back? Give you a prime example. On my farm right now, on the ground, unless I go out this morning, we got a new calf. We have 8 calves on the ground. 4 boys, 4 girls. Obviously, all of the boys will be sold off this farm. Some of them will become bulls. Some of them will become steers. Some of them will go right into the market, becoming hamburger and steak and all of that. The question then comes into play, so I make sure everybody understands, is those 4 females, will I keep all of them, or will I use the same criteria that I used last year and say, okay, which ones are the best 2 or 3, because I only want to keep the best cows here on this farm. But I'm hearing that the federal government will get more information on it, may want to pay farmers to keep heifers behind so that we can grow the herd at a higher rate. So we'll see how this plays out. But right now, where I'm sitting here on my farm, I'm using still the same criteria. So even though we know we're going to have more than these 4 heifers, we're probably going to end up with 10 or 12 more. The reality of it is, will I keep all of them, or will I only keep the best? And I think the federal government may be asking me to keep all of them so that we can actually grow that herd a whole lot faster. But at the same time, we do not want to drop on the quality, because I believe the reason why people are still willing to pay higher prices at the grocery store is because of the quality of the beef that we are producing here in the United States. And I hope and pray that when we bring in Argentina beef, that they actually put it right on the tag. This beef is from Argentina, this beef is from wherever, this beef is from wherever, and this beef here is from the United States. And specifically, you can say it's from Georgia or Rockmart or Texas or wherever. So we got a lot of work to do. Let me change gears just a little bit, because earlier this week I was talking to a good friend that's out there in Nebraska, and he was talking about the ag industry as a whole, and the ag industry in Nebraska is tied 100% to agriculture. And right now, Nebraska as a state is hurting across the board. Nebraska is like Texas, is a major state when it comes to cattle, and they are truly concerned about bringing in Argentina beef, and how is that going to affect their farmers on the ground, especially with everything, all the pressures that I just kind of told you about. So with that, let's see what we're talking about out there in Nebraska, and then how does that affect us all across the United States, please.
A Nebraska beef producer says we shouldn't rely on foreign supply. This as the U.S. quadruples imports from Argentina.
The White House says the goal is to curb the rise in beef prices. KETV Newswatch 7's Aaron Haggerty is getting the facts tonight. Aaron.
Yeah, Bill, Julie, the average price of a pound of ground chuck was $6.52 in December, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's nearly $1 more than it was a year prior.
University of Nebraska-Lincoln Associate Professor Elliot Dennis tells me Argentina's beef won't do much for those who buy it.
Maybe a little bit.
That's because only around 1% of the beef Americans eat will be from Argentina, he says, and there might be a downside.
What it's doing is it's potentially provides a disincentive for producers to kind of continue to grow the herd.
There's strong demand for beef, but the cattle population is near a record low.
We want to be self-sufficient.
Craig Uden, the board president of Nebraska Cattlemen, doesn't expect much of an impact on price either.
No, we do not. We're still short of product throughout the system. We'll see where we go. As the cow herd increases, the numbers stabilize and start to move higher, we'll be more self-sufficient, but that doesn't happen overnight.
Uden says he understands the decision to quadruple supply from Argentina from 20,000 metric tons to as much as 80,000 for a year.
We don't necessarily like that we have to import. It's somewhat of a necessity right at the moment. We wish it had been handled a little different.
All 5 members of Nebraska's congressional delegation spoke against the idea to import more from Argentina when President Trump floated the idea in October. And last week, Senator Deb Fischer said, instead of imports that sideline American ranchers, we should be focused on solutions that cut red tape, lower production costs, and support growing our cattle herd.
Yeah, as you can see there, I think it's important that we watch what happens out in Nebraska and Texas, because those are some major places where cattle are. I think it's probably more cattle than people. And if our representatives in Congress from those particular states are saying, hey, let's slow down on bringing in all this beef, what can we do to help grow the herd? Because like I said very early in the process, the cattle producer like myself that's at the very front end, that has the cow and the calf. Prime example, today I hope and pray that when I walk outside, I got another calf on the ground. So that particular guy, we are making money. The question is, what is the incentive for us to keep that calf in our operation and grow the herd? And right now, based on the kind of money that's coming in, based on farmers needing to pay off bills from past years or debts from past years, they need the money. The question is, how are we going to be able to balance it? And I think the last thing that we need to do is bring in more foreign beef. And the next thing you know, is more foreign beef that's coming in than actually what we're producing. I don't want to scare anybody, but I think we should keep our eyeballs on that as we move forward. One of the things I say every week is this: it is unbelievable pressure on our farmers across the board. Yesterday we talked about the beef producers are making money. However, it is very hard for people, regardless if you were born and raised on a farm, it is very hard for you to be able to get into the beef cattle business plan because of the input costs are so high, land costs are so high, supplies are so high. And I'm worried about, are we going to miss out on that next generation being able to take this thing on? because the average farmer now is roughly about 59 years old, 60 years old. I'm like I talked about in past shows, we got to make sure that we can bring along that younger generation. And when I say bring along, I'm not just talking about them just working on the farm, talking about it. I'm talking about them actually owning a farm and learning and having a mentor and all those kind of things. The other thing that, I mentioned every week is unbelievable pressure on our farmers, especially our row crop farmers. They have yet to receive their payments. And if they have, we will report that next week. And there's plenty of them that are saying, I don't want to be the one that loses the farm after 5 and 6 and 7 generations across the board. So like I say every week, I want to make sure that on this show, because I spent many years in the military, and I know we still have an issue with our veterans that are choosing to commit suicide, but that number is actually higher when it comes to our farmers. And the crazy thing is, we don't actually have mental health facilities here in the rural communities. Our mental health facility is, if somebody's in a crisis, they put them in a jail, which is a sheriff's jail, and that's just not right. So I want to make sure, no matter what week I'm talking on this show, that I pass the information out. So if somebody's in a crisis, that they can call 988 and get some help, no matter what zip code you live in here in the United States, because, today may be a tough day, but just make it through the day. The sun will come up tomorrow and you'll have a different perspective on it, and we're going to be okay. A lot of people are working on this agriculture thing, and I'm confident that all of us, we're going to get through it. This is not the first time. It's been tough times in the world of agriculture, and it won't be the last, but we will get through it like generations before us. The other thing I want to pivot from that is because I'm very excited, and this is going to take a lot of work. I'm not saying that everything's going to work out, because my staff is working behind the scenes right now feverishly. And if y'all guys know me personally, I'm running 8 different ways. I'm not even sure if my eyes are open right now, but that's okay. Got to put in the work. But one of the things that we wanted to talk about next week is, when it's tied to agriculture, is tied to the greater community. We want to talk about PFAS. That's a forever chemical, but we want to talk specifically about PFAS when it comes to Northwest Georgia, because Northwest Georgia is a hot spot, and it comes all the way from Dalton, Georgia, all the way down to Rome. We want to talk about PFAS being in the water. We want to talk about PFAS, how is it affecting our farmers, because some of our farmers in Northwest Georgia didn't know it, no fault of their own, but it got into their grass. It affects their cattle. You can't eat it. You can't do all those kind of things. So we just want to have that discussion. My hope and prayer is that we can put together a panel of experts. We have the discussion of where we're at and then where we need to go forward. But the only reason I tell you this, if we pull it off, next week's show will not be at 7 o'clock in the morning. I won't make you get up for that at 7 o'clock in the morning. When we put it all together, we may actually have a special show. We will advertise it, that we can talk to all the people that are the experts in what is going on with PFAS, what's currently happening in the world of PFAS in Northwest Georgia. What are we doing when it comes to the people that actually got cancer from it? And then what are we doing to hold somebody accountable? But then also, how do we do the cleanup? And is it a way to clean it up? So I'm excited about it. And all of those things, the reason why I'm doing it on the show, Voices from the Dirt Road, is because, like I said, when we first started this show was designed so that if you lived in the rural community, or you came from the rural community, or if you even lived in the city and just wanted to understand the rural community, you could have a way to look into what is affecting small town America, agriculture world. And right here where I live, I live in Northwest Georgia. We have a PFAS problem, and I would be remiss if I didn't actually talk about it and try to become part of the solution. So I'm excited. for next week. I'm not sure if we're going to pull it off, but that is the goal. And after 40 years of being in the military, I like doing things that are hard. So we're going to work behind the scenes, and we're going to try our best to get all the experts here on the show. And on that particular show, we'll make sure that you can actually ask questions and kind of go from there. So with that, I just want to say thanks to everybody that tunes into our show. If you have sent some comments in and I didn't get to them, I'm sorry. But what I will say is this: as we actually put the show out there on all those other platforms later on today, if I don't answer them by then, next week I'll start the show off with answering some of your questions. But again, to sum up this particular show, we just want to take a few minutes and talk about the cow-calf operation, where we're at. And I think just to make sure that everybody understands, we're still got to figure out how we're going to grow the herd. And when I say the herd, I'm talking about the United States entire herd. That's all the farmers, everybody. How are we going to grow it to meet the demand of the American people, so that when we actually say that we're feeding America, that's true. We are feeding America, but right now we need some help to come from some other places. Don't like it, but that's currently where we're at. So, hey, I hope you enjoyed the show today. It was kind of quick. I know that. My cup is empty. Hey, guys, have a great day. See you next week.